Hi, welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. I'm Melissa Muir. In this video, we are working on project number 10 from the Professional Jewelry Making book by Revere. The project is the Foxtail chain. Let's get started now. Now in projects 4 and 6, we've made chains, and in project 6 we used a round mandrel, and in project 4 we made an oval mandrel. In this one we are going to be using a very long and thin flat mandrel. Now we want this to be 1.6 millimeters by 18 millimeters. And here you'll see I'm just a little bit off by 0.02, and that is close enough. And we just want to make sure that we're kind of close by on that as we go throughout our piece. And you can do it on the other end as well. So again, I'm pretty even all the way down, and that's what we want to see. Another thing that I have done on this is I have kind of rounded the edges here, smoothed those, so that when I go to take my rings off, it's going to be a little easier. Because you might remember when we do a coil around this, when we do a coil around a round one, the coil is going to open up. But when you have something long and misshaped like this, it's actually going to be a little tighter. One thing you might notice about the mandrel that I'm using is that it's copper. Copper is definitely not the ideal thing for this, just because it can be softened as you heat it up when you're trying to melt away the paper. But it does work, and I happen to have copper in my studio, so that is what I used. Now again, this is 1.6 millimeter, which is approximately 14 gauge. So it's going to be pretty thick. I happen to have a shear where I can make that big old cut. If you don't, your jeweler's saw and your hand shears and files are going to be your best friend. Because it tightens, we want to use some paper, and we're going to wrap this around so that when we go to take this off, we can just burn off the paper, and that will allow us to release our rings a little bit easier. Now I do want to have ever so slight of a little bit of an overlap here on each of these, and I also want to keep this very tight, and I want to make certain that it stays even as we go through all the way down. Otherwise, we are going to have rings that are not quite the same size. So just take a little bit of time, adjust the paper as necessary so that it's even as you wrap all the way around. We don't want any of these bubbles in here like that. So take a sec, smooth it out. Okay, so I'm going to go down one direction, and then I'm going to add just a little bit of tape down here. And now I'm going to come back and wrap the other direction. So this paper is about 15 millimeters wide. And I'm pretty happy with that. Everything overlapped the same way on each direction. Again, I'm just going to take a little piece of tape here just to secure that for myself. And now I'm going to wrap here, and everything should be approximately the same. So if I take a second and look at this, do my measurements. Yep, I'm pretty close everywhere that it matters. So I think we're pretty good here. The wire that I'm using is 0.6 millimeters, which is also approximately 22 gauge. So that's what I have here that I'm going to be using. To do this, I'm going to insert this into my vise, and I want to not make things difficult for me. I want to put this into my vise so that the end of it is clamped in. I have already taken the opportunity to anneal this, so my wire is actually pretty soft here. I want to be able to pull this pretty tight. Now you can see I've got a lot of wire here, so it's kind of long, and I did that so that I wouldn't have to do this multiple times. And what I like to do is I like to just kind of hook my wire into place on this mandrel, and I'm going to start the first couple of coils just by rounding this out. Now what I want here is for my coils to lay side by side. Now I did that so that I can easily pull this back, and now I can put some tension on my wire here and then begin to coil this. Now, just like I did in project number 4 when we were doing the curb and cable chain, I want to pull this really nice and tight so that I have a lot of tension here, and I want to just pay very close attention to where this wire sits when I roll it over, because I need each of these coils to sit right next to each other, and that is important so that we will then have rings that are the same size when it comes time to cut them. By doing this, again, we're holding this very, very tight to the mandrel, and that is going to make it difficult to remove. And that, again, is why we have this paper on here. The paper then will burn away, and when that burns away, it leaves a little bit of space, and we'll easily be able to slip this off of our mandrel. All right, and there is the end of our coil. So now I'm going to take this, take off my tape, and I will take this over to my torch, and we will burn off the paper, where then we'll be able to remove our rings off of the mandrel. So the next thing I'm going to do is just burn this off. This will also anneal our rings. And next we'll quench this to remove the rest of the paper that is under the rings. Once that's been quenched, we can then begin to work our rings off of our mandrel. Might be a little difficult at first until we get it past some of this paper that is here underneath, but then we should be able to just slip it off. We now have paper and ashes that are inside of this, so just take a moment, rinse this through some more of your water, maybe get a little brush and kind of work it in there, but be very careful because this is now annealed, so it will be very soft. In the meantime, you also want to clean off the mandrel because we are going to use this kind of as a holder when it comes time to actually cut our rings. When we go to cut our rings, you want to use an extremely fine blade, and in this case I'm using an A-dot blade. Now this is almost like working with a human hair, so it's very, very thin. You want to be very cautious not to get your blade too tight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rings on the mandrel. So the mandrel is going to kind of help stabilize everything for me. And what I want is I want to pull these up to the top here so that one of my rings is kind of hanging off. I'm going to bring this down, and I want to stabilize the rings with my hands from underneath my bench pin. And this is going to be easier said than done on some of these, I think. And then I'm just going to cut one ring at a time. So now that we have each of the rings cut, it's time to kind of clean these up and get them ready for soldering. You want to take a file and remove any of the burrs that might be here on the ends. Do it very, very, very carefully because you do not want to remove too much metal or things are not going to align right when you go to solder them. You want to take a little piece of Scotch-Brite and just clean up each of the rings. Just make sure we've got a nice good surface on here before we move on to the next stage. And once these are all lined up and cleaned up, we're ready to solder these. So you see here that I have everything lined up. The end is just barely hanging off the edge here. And then I also have my solder chips placed here on my bench block. So the next thing I need to do is get just a very small flame. I don't need a big one, and we also want to be very, very careful with this because our wire is so thin that it's going to take nothing at all. I also want to be very careful not to get too big of solder pieces on this. So I pick up my piece of solder. I'm doing the solder pick method, and what I want to do is just come in and gently warm the underside of this wire here, and you'll notice I kind of come in and out because I am very high at risk of melting this. So I'm just going to place that solder on there until it flows, and it doesn't take hardly anything at all. So you may have a few that you kind of end up ruining because it does go so fast. The more of these you do, the better it's going to become, and you'll understand how the solder and that wire work together. Sometimes when I get a big solder blob, I can come in, move it onto my block, and then just heat that up a little bit more, and that solder will flow a little nicer. That one did not quite flow as well. There we go. So my solder adhered, but it did not flow like I would like it to. So that's kind of when I move it onto my charcoal block and can get that solder to flow a little bit better. There we go. And same thing on that one. So we'll just give it just a little bit of heat just to move that solder around. Doesn't take much. And this ring seems to have opened a little bit on me, so he is not going to work. And sometimes that happens. And there we have it. So I had all of those except for one that worked well. So now what I'm going to do is quench all of these and pickle them, and we are ready for the next step. Now I actually had to draw down some of my wire for this. We need 1.8 millimeters, and that's in between 14 and 13 gauge. So it's kind of an awkward size, at least for me here. So what I did was I had some 12 gauge wire that I drew down with the draw plate. And so I've just kind of bent them around into hooks. One is going to go into a vise and the other I've put into a vise grip. And we're going to use these to make sure that we have the elongated size proper on all of our rings. So what I'm going to do is just open up this vise. I'm going to insert my little hook here, close this guy up, make it nice and tight. And I also took a kind of a nylon mallet and just kind of hammered this so that everything would be nice and stiff, because it is copper. I did not have any brass or steel or anything like that. So I wanted to make certain that it was going to work. So what I'm going to do is insert my ring onto this wire, and I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm just going to give a little tug. And what that's going to do is elongate this ring just so that everything is nice and even with each other. And I want to do that for all of the rings. So just insert it on there, give a nice little tug. It's not going to take very much, especially where our jump rings are so thin to begin with, and they're annealed because we just soldered them. So they should be nice and soft and pliable. And so this step should go fairly quick. So on this next phase, we want to bend each of these rings around kind of into a U shape. And you want to try to make them each the same. So what I like to do is put it on the mandrel here. I'm going to bend this up and around, and my goal is to try to have them so that they are even. Then I'll hook into that, pull it down to the bottom, and then give a nice little tug. So now I should have a U, and I want these to be as uniform as possible. And you can see here that's looking pretty good. So that's what we're going to do for the next few rings, well, for all of the rings really. And then we'll continue after that. Now our goal is to get this little chain here, and it's a little bit interesting at first, but once you get the first couple of links together, then it goes really, really easy. You might also find it helpful to have a dowel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 of my links, and I want to hook them together and rotate it around so that they basically go in opposite directions. Now I'm going to push the 2 of these closer together so that it will create a loop inside of there. I don't know if you guys can see this, and it's kind of hard to hold, but there's this little loop right inside of there. And that's where I want to insert my next ring. So I'll insert that in through there just like so. And then I'm going to rotate it, and this can get kind of tricky, so that it follows the loop here, on my case, on the right. So see how it rotated around, and now the 2 ends are pushing out. So now what I want to do is I want to insert into the loop that's created between the new ring that I've just added and the first ring that was here. So there should be a nice little space right here. Hopefully you guys can see that. So now I'm going to insert the next ring into that. And again, I'm going to take this and rotate it around so that it falls into alignment again with the others. Now, I'm going to pull the second ring forward just a little bit, push the other one back, because now I want to insert into this one. So it's between the new ring and the one that was there previous. So again, I'm going to insert into that. And once again, I want to rotate it around so that it falls into alignment with the previous 2. Well, now this case, previous 4. Well, previous 3, yeah, 4. So now I'm going to insert into the previous one that we had and the new one we've just added. So again, I'll insert that into there and rotate this around. Sometimes this rotation can get kind of tricky. And again, that's where I kind of find that if I have a little dowel or something, that can help. All right, so now again, we see everything is into alignment. And one more time, I'm going to insert in between that one that I just inserted and the one that was there previous. Rotate this around. And now, insert again right here. Like I said, once you get it going, then it all comes together very, very quickly. So this is what our chain is now looking like. It's looking pretty good, nice and even and everything at this point in time. So at this point in time, our chain is not quite in alignment. There's a little bit of a twist to that. And so we want to pull this through a square draw plate, and that will help to take care of that. To get this in here, what I'm going to do is just string a little piece of wire through one end of my chain, and I'm going to then proceed to use some of these. Now I know you guys see the round part and I see the square part, and what I want to do is just kind of pull this in through until I find a section that fits just right. So that one's still a little bit big, and he's still a little big too. Maybe we'll jump down a couple spots. There we go. And that starts to get us into an alignment where we want to. So I'm going to grab this with my vice grips and I'll pull that through, and I'm going to continue to move on down a little smaller. Now you can see after pulling this through the draw plate, it is much more in alignment than it was before. So we have everything that kind of lines up together instead of having little twists and turns on that. When it comes time to polishing this chain, you want to make certain that you wrap this around a piece of wood or a dowel or something like that. You never want to hold a chain when you are polishing that. So as I've said before, we're not finishing our projects. We are learning the technique, and you can take it to the point where you do finish it. But for this series and the videos, I'm sticking very closely to what the book is, and that's just showing you the technique, not necessarily that finished piece. Now there's a couple of clasps that are in the book. There's a sister clasp, I believe, in Project 13, and then you have the cylinder clasp, which I believe is chapter 23. So you do have a couple of options that would work really, really well for this chain. So take a look at those and maybe play around. Obviously, I'm not quite long enough for a finished chain, but I definitely have that technique down. By the time you've done a few of these links, you're good to go after that. So perhaps I will definitely make some more links, finish this up, and you may or may not see a finished project from me soon. As I've stated before, I'm learning right along with you. So if you notice little hiccups as I go through this, again, I'm learning too. This is only like the second or third time that I've actually done this particular project in this manner, following these steps. So hopefully you guys will have a little bit of leniency on me. I hope you guys are enjoying this series and you like the videos. If you do, please be sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so that you get your notifications as to when I create new videos and put that up for you. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. As in all the other videos that I have done in this series, I will also include links to the various tools that I use in this project as well. So be sure to check that out. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.